On May 22nd, the agenda for the Chicago Board of Education meeting basically proclaimed that the board was going to close 50 of the city's elementary schools and subject other schools to turn around in what's called co-location. This is the largest number of these actions in the history of American public education. The issue probably was for the board was how to finesse this and make it look good for the TV cameras so that the massive protests that had taken place over the previous 7 months were whited out of the history books. Since Rahm Emanuel appointed this Board of Education in May 2011, they've done everything possible to gag and end any real public participation at the board meetings. In January 2013, they decreed that anyone who wanted to speak at a board meeting had to sign up online by computer going to the board's website, that only 60 people would be allowed to sign up, no matter how many people wanted to speak, and that once that 60 had been reached, no one else would be allowed to sign up. The Board of Education claims that 60 people times 2 minutes gives you 120 minutes or 2 hours. In fact, though, there hasn't been a board meeting since January when all 60 people spoke. Usually at least 10, and in one case I counted about 14 people don't show up for the board meetings. So the board is not only restricting the number of people who can speak, but during the time of the board meeting, fewer people are actually getting to speak because of the no-shows. There were a lot of dramatic moments during the board meeting, but the two most dramatic probably came when the board actually blacks out completely one of the foremost leaders of the communities in public education in Chicago, Shannon Bennett, who spoke and then was dragged away from the podium. And the board cuts off, almost in mid-sentence, Erica Clark, one of the parent leaders who was speaking against the closings at that meeting. She began reading the names of all the schools that were going to be closed, starting with the A's and reading them in alphabetical order.
Every Chicago public school is my school. Altgeld is my school. Armstrong is my school. Attucks is my school.
And when she got to the P's, the board secretary called time and said her time had run out after 2 full minutes, and she continued reading and then sat on the floor. The board people dragged her out of the board chambers. The microphone was shut off. None of this is seen on the video, and the camera goes to the next speaker, who's one of the shills for the charter schools.
Calhoun North is my school. Cantor is my school. Delano is my school. Dumas is my school. Des Dupre is my school.
So I was going through the list of names. I think I got to the P's, and they told me my time was up. So I guess I decided I was not going to play by their rules anymore because their rules are stacked against us. And so I started to leave and walked away from the podium, and a few feet over, sat down and tried to keep reading through the list. A few minutes, I think I got through maybe 1 or 2 more schools, and then a couple of security guys came over and said something like, you know, you don't want to do this, let's go. And then they tried to pick me up and drag me out.
Don't treat her like that. Williams is my school.
Just trying to finish the list. I was trying to read off the rest of the school names, and sadly I think I didn't get to all of them. I think I either forgot a few or just in the commotion couldn't get to them. But
we didn't know until the end of the meeting, when the board actually voted to destroy all these schools, that Erica Clark was providing the board and the public with the only reading of the list of the names of every school that was about to be destroyed by a board vote. When the board got to vote later, the secretary read off the board report numbers, which are like EX9, EX10, EX11, and never once did they actually say the name of the school for which each of those reports was about. So the only opportunity the public had during the entire board meeting to hear the names of the schools that were being destroyed was when Erica Clark was cut off.
at the time that I got up to testify, I really wasn't aware that that would be the only time that all of the schools' names were mentioned, that the board later on that day didn't even bother to take a vote on each school and didn't even bother to mention the school that they were closing. It was just such a shameful display of arrogance on their part. It's as if they don't even care that these are their real people, real children, real families, real teachers in these schools. They're just numbers, just data points on a spreadsheet to them, and they just don't care.
What the board did, the secretary read the name of the agenda item basically, which is like ES6, EX7, EX8. Each of those pertained to one school and said that the school would be closed. Then the board president, David Vitale, said the words, "Seeing no objections from my fellow board members, I'll apply the last favorable voice vote." At that moment, the closing of all those schools, this historic moment, became legal, and the board had not even had the courtesy to say the names of the schools that were being closed, some after 50 or even 100 years of distinguished service to the people of Chicago. I started to walk across the board chambers at the time, and one of the parents who had spoken earlier asked me, "What just happened?" And I said, "That was the vote to close your schools." And she just started crying and said something like, "I can't believe they didn't even have the dignity and decency to say the name of the school."
The parents, teachers, and community supporters who valiantly risk their liberty on behalf of the children of Chicago who will suffer from the failed policies of Chicago schools closings. These people are being...
There is where the video should show what actually happened, which was Shannon Bennett began speaking and suddenly was dragged away from the microphone and the podium. The board security immediately grabbed him, pulled the podium back towards the board president, and basically dragged him out of the room. And this was the first place where the video completely distorts what actually happened.
At the CPS meeting on May 22nd, 2013, I was attempting to convey a message that many members of our community and communities throughout the city felt about the decision that was about to be made by the, what I would call erroneous and what I called at the time, just illegitimate board. So my message was simply that, one, we did not honor their decision and their decision to close the schools. We knew they were going to do it. Two, we felt that the whole process was false and a farce, and it was not inclusive of voices of the community. And three, we knew, and we are very clear, we were very clear then, we're clear now, on what the results of these school closures will mean for our communities. Children from our communities will be impacted by the violence, by the intimidation, and in many cases, which is not talked about, the unwelcoming tone that they will receive from some of the schools that they will be merged into. So it was a moment to really just set the record straight from a community perspective of what we know as experts in our communities, not folk who don't send their children to public schools, not folk who don't walk the streets like we walk the streets every day, and most importantly, not folks who are going to have to clean up this mess.
We demand that they release the parents, teachers, and community supporters who valiantly risk their liberty on behalf of the children of Chicago who will suffer from the failed policies of Chicago schools closings. These people were held, were detained in the Capitol today.
Jesse Sharkey will be our next speaker.
And at this point, we have a few people from
The CTU remains
Excuse me, sir. We are registered. She's registered. I'm registered.
What's your name, sir? Excuse me, sir.
At this point, this board is illegitimate. We're not supporting coming to this board, continue to do the same thing, and it's nonsense. So at this point, the vote that you all are going to take is illegitimate. And Ms. Zopp, Ms. Murray Bennett, and every other person here, you got the blood of our children on your hands. The blood of our children on your hands. So you need to understand, if you continue this, you have to be nonsense. You can change your hands just behind. You know what's happening. It's the blood on your hands. The blood on your hands. So right now, you think about the children that are going to be killed because of these stupid ass decisions you make. This is real for us. This is real for us. You came to my community and you lied. You lied. And stop. The National Urban League needs to hear about you. You're closing black schools, black and brown schools. You need to hear about this. Birdville, what the hell did you do in Cleveland? What did you do in Detroit? Now you're in Chicago, we're not taking that. So 2015, your little mayor, the little mayor on the fifth floor is going to get it. Any alderman who's not here conceding with this shit, you don't concede on this. You don't concede on this.
I was pulled away by security in a very dramatic fashion, I would say, because what they wanted to do was us to immediately stop talking. So as I'm moving, the mic is being pulled. I pulled the mic. It was one of those detachable mics, so I did not break the mic. It was detachable. So the mic actually comes out of my hand. At that point, they had turned the mic off. So when I pulled it out, they just turned it off, and the security guards are in some type of lock motion, and they're moving me out. And this whole time, the group that I'm standing with was still standing there singing and chanting the things that they wanted to say. So I was actually removed from the group, still in the hall, in the room, and I had to go back up there to get my people because they then started doing the exact same thing. The security guards did some kind of formation where they lock their arms, they encircled the group, and they were trying to motion them out. So at that point is when it looked like we were being arrested or things like that, but we were basically moved out of the hall. But it was in a fashion to prove a point that they were in control, and this was not the meeting where people could actually be open and honest. This was like a dictatorship. If you didn't say things that were okay with them, out you go. I was yielded some time from Rebecca Martinez, and at that moment I looked at the faces of the board members, and particularly 2 or 3 faces really got to me. And those faces happened to be Mahalia Hines and Andrea Zopp in particular. And the reason why those faces really got to me emotionally, and I felt the urge to just really speak my mind, was because those are 2 people we've engaged as a community, and we thought in good faith that they would take the concerns of parents, of students, and they didn't. So particularly Ms. Hines had a meeting in our community here at our office with parents who told her about a plan that they had worked on for a year and a half to save some of our schools. This plan was supported by DePaul University. This plan was supported by Chicago Teachers Union. This plan was supported by organizations that had had true track records of turning around schools without displacing teachers and students. So long story short, I was thinking that, like, you lied to us. You said you would get back to our community, you didn't. So that's what I was saying. I was like, you're lying. You're liars. I felt that each person on that board had a responsibility to the communities that they are supposedly representatives of. So is Andrea Zopp. She's the Urban League. They're the national organization that sits as a civil rights legacy of supporting the rights of disenfranchised people. So we felt that we were staring in the face of people who were hypocrites, who were basically doing what their jobs were at the time, which was to be rubber stamps for a decision that was truly already made way in advance of this meeting. So I just kind of really felt that this was the time to let those particular people know, not like they're major decision makers, because we're clear they don't pull the trigger. They are rubber stamps for the mayor of the city, who's ultimately controlled by the business community. So we understand the chain of command and the people who actually have the power.
These are the same people who are in Washington, D.C., fighting against a livable wage, but yet they want to disrupt our public school system. Chicago, we're saying enough is enough.
And what's happening is that this stuff is waking up a sleeping giant. The biggest part of this is that we will now be awake, alive. We will be opening our eyes to what we should have been doing anyway, which is controlling our own destiny and creating the quality of life that we desire, not some folk who are running from office to office every other year and trying to get to ascend to a higher office. That's what we have here with our elected officials. That's what we have here with a lot of political leaders. But it's time for a new day, a new type of leader. Because one of the things that we always believe here at COCO is that we are the leaders that we've been looking for. So it's not a one leader. It's not that's the leader, this charismatic person, this messiah that's going to save us. You're going to save your own community, block by block, like it should be, like it should have been always. So that's what the new day looks like to me.
I think what happened at the board meeting on May 22nd is going to really galvanize the forces who are working for an elected school board. It just hit you in the face how unaccountable these people are, how they don't care about what's really happening in our schools. I I think it's really going to add a lot of momentum to the forces pushing for an elected school board. I think it's like across the city now people realize that they aren't being listened to, their voices don't matter, and we need a radical change in Chicago.